The Grassroot Institute with Dr. Keli'i Akina is brought to you by the Honua'ula Foundation, helping one person at a time. And now, here's Keli'i Akina.
Aloha kakahiaka and good morning, Maui. It's Monday, December 14th, and welcome to Grassroot Institute. I'm Keli'i Akina, president of the Grassroot Institute, and with me today is one of our tremendous team members, Joe Kent. Aloha, Joe.
Aloha, Dr. Akina, and aloha, Maui, and welcome to Hawaii's only independent think tank working to advance individual liberty, the free market, and limited accountable government.
One of the things I really love about this program, and all of you out there who are listening on beautiful Valley Isle, Maui, is the fact that we're able to tell the truth without fear of being politically correct. There are a lot of things that are taking place here in the state of Hawaii that don't get talked about, that don't get written about, and that's what Grassroot Institute is committed to bringing to you, those kinds of discussions that need to take place to make this a better economy, a better government, and a better society. And that's why I'm so glad we have talented researchers at the organization who really dig in deeply and take a look at what's truly happening here to build a better Hawaii.
That's right. And today we're going to talk with Andrew Walden, publisher of Hawaii Free Press, about the TMT and how it affects Maui.
One of the things I love about Hawaii is that we have people who are young and people who are old and people in the middle, and there's a very special group that we need to be focusing on, and that is the emerging new millennials. What do they think? How do they care about society, and what kind of future will they build for us? Today we get to talk with Sean Mitsui, the president of Young Americans for Liberty at the University of Hawaii, as well as Clarke Velasco, one of his officers. And they're going to let you know that there is hope for the next generation here in Hawaii.
After that, we'll visit with environmental researcher Stephen Dollar, and we'll talk about man's impact on the reef.
Here on Maui, one of our concerns is the quality of health care. And you know we've talked a lot about that in terms of the state hospital system. But there is a new model for health care that is taking place right here on the Valley Isle. We'll talk with Charlotte Ego about that.
And finally, once again, we'll tune in to another story in the life of Jonathan Gullible, and we'll talk with author and economist Ken Schoolland.
Everything is beautiful on Maui, the people, the places, the weather. But sad to say, our beauty is scarred by the fact of homelessness, which has risen in dramatic numbers over the last few years. What's the solution to this? Well, at the Grassroot Institute, we are working on free market solutions to homelessness. And Joe Kent is going to open up the program today with a feature. He'll talk with Charlie Jencks, a former government official here on Maui, about the causes of homelessness here on the Valley Isle.
We're here with Charlie Jencks, owner's representative for Honua'ula Partners and manager for Pacific Rim Land. Welcome, Charlie.
Good morning, Joe.
Why is it so difficult to find affordable housing on Maui?
Well, part of the reason, Joe, is that, in my opinion, there's a lack of inventory. There's no new product being built to speak of in numbers large enough to offset the demand. We have increasing demand. The prices for single family, the median household price for single family is going up while the supply is flatlining. So you have a bad economic situation.
So it's supply and demand.
That's what it's always been, and that's what it is today.
And supply is low and demand is high, so the price goes up.
That's correct.
So why is supply low?
Supply is low because it's very difficult and costly to build housing in Hawaii and on Maui especially, and there are a couple of reasons for that. If you are an investor and you want to come to Maui and build housing, whether it's multifamily or single family housing, or even affordable housing, one of the first things you want to do is buy land that, if possible, that's fully entitled. It's zoned for housing, it's community planned for housing. And then the second thing is you want to be able to make sure that the land you buy is served by utilities. And one of the critical issues, of course, is water. And I recall you had Stanford Carr on one of your earlier programs talking about this issue, and Stanford was absolutely correct. if you can't get any kind of a certification as to the availability of water or sewer service, it's very difficult to convince a banker to loan you money on the come. You need to be sure that A, you're going to have water, and B, that when you build the homes, you can get a certificate of occupancy and have sewer service. And today in Maui County, as in the past, that isn't a possibility. You can't get a letter of assurance or will serve letter from the County of Maui for either one of those utilities.
So when you buy a piece of land on Maui, actually, that land may come with a lot of hidden baggage attached to it. For example, if you can't get hooked up to the water, you can't get other things. Is that right?
Absolutely correct. In addition to that, in many jurisdictions on the mainland, the local jurisdictions are doing the roadway improvements and doing comprehensive zoning, which shortens the time frame and reduces the cost for the home builder. Here in Maui County, none of those improvements are done. They're all the responsibility of the home builder, which then translates that and pushes that cost off to the home buyer. And then also, without the zoning in place, creates delay and interest carry that adds to the bottom line. It just makes it that much more difficult to make any reasonable return, which the banks require for the risk.
We've seen many studies showing that one of the reasons for lack of supply in housing is because of the complex rules that one has to go through, the maze of regulations that someone has to go through in order to build a house. Can you speak to some of those, some of that maze?
Sure. Hawaii is unique in that we have a multi-tiered entitlement process. Number one, first of all, you need to make sure that the land you want to purchase is urbanized by the State Land Use Commission for development. And then you need to make sure that the land is community planned correctly in the Maui Island Plan and the community plan, whether it's single family or multifamily. And then thirdly, you need to have the zoning in place so that you can actually build the units you want to build. So it's a multi-tiered process that takes a tremendous amount of time. And also compliance with Chapter 343, which is the state's environmental code requiring an EA or an EIS for the most fundamental urbanization of the land, which is a very complex, time-consuming, and expensive process into and of itself.
So we've got plans on top of plans on top of plans, and some of those plans don't necessarily agree with one another, just the plans themselves. For example, the community plan and the zoning code. Is that right?
That's correct. We have a situation in Maui County where we have community plans that describe land uses in the community plans. We have, I think, 9 different community plans, and with very few exceptions, the land use categories are all the same, describing hotel, describing light industrial, single family, multifamily, and in many cases, you have a direct conflict between what the community plan describes as a use area and what the zoning allows. And I'll give you a couple of examples. An example in Maui County in the community plans is hotel. Hotel is described as visitor accommodations without kitchens. The zoning, on the other hand, describes hotel districts as allowing for single family, multifamily, hotels, motels, and a variety of commercial uses. So right there you can see a kind of an inborn conflict between the use categories and the land use designations.
Okay, so for example, the community plan may say no kitchens allowed in hotels, but the zoning code is different, though.
The zoning code in the hotel district would allow condominiums, would allow timeshares, but in the community plan, you can't have any of that.
So then, actually, we're having a debate now about in the community then about what trumps what. Is the community plan higher on this, or is the zoning code higher on this? And actually, has anyone spoken to resolve this debate?
There have been a number of discussions, and I will, I guess, go back to the early 2000s. I asked then Director of Planning Michael Foley what took precedence, either the community plan or zoning with the North Beach Makai properties. And he told me in a letter that the community plans were advisory, that the zoning established the basic uses. Now, here in South Maui, the Maui Lu project, I read a declaration from also Planning Director Jeffrey Hunt, who said exactly the same thing. And now the Director, William Spence, is saying exactly the same thing, that the community plan is advisory. It's a guideline.
So the zoning code trumps the community plan in that area.
That's absolutely correct.
And that's stated by the planning director.
3 planning directors, but we have some folks in South Maui who think that the community plans trump zoning, which is contrary to 35 years of prior practice in Maui County.
What's the problem, though, if there's a conflict? Okay, so we've got conflicts. I'm sure there's many other conflicts in the code. And what's the problem about this?
Well, the problem is, if you don't straighten this out, you could potentially end up with uses that would end up being non-conforming. If the community plan says that commercial is not allowed in light industrial, but the zoning does, well, we have a very large light industrial district in central Maui in the Kahului Light Industrial Complex that's chock-a-block full of restaurants, retail establishments that don't meet the specific definition in the community plan. If they burn down, someone could say that's a non-conforming use, you can't rebuild it. Target, the brand new Target, is also technically, if you follow this line of logic, a non-conforming use. Likewise, North Beach Makai in Kaanapali, which is chock-a-block full of timeshares and multifamily condominiums, in the event of a hurricane, if they were destroyed or they burned down, someone could say, wait a minute, the community plan takes precedence here. It doesn't allow this use, so you can't rebuild it. That's a very dangerous precedent for Maui County.
I see. So it could raise flags all over the island. And well, thanks so much for helping to clarify this issue for us. Is there anything else you want to say about it? No,
I'm frankly looking forward to getting this issue, this conflict between the community plans and zoning addressed so that we can all move on and hopefully build some housing and address a really big need here in Maui County.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Charlie Jencks, owner's representative for Honua'ula Partners and manager for Pacific Rim Land. You're listening to the Grassroot Institute with Dr. Keli'i Akina.
In order to make informed decisions, we need good information. Sometimes the media, newspaper, radio, television only provide us with surface information and commercials as well as viewpoints that come from special interests. So where do you get information that is pertinent, that allows us to see how free market values are being treated in Hawaii? Well, there's a tremendous source. It's called the Hawaii Free Press, and we're here now with publisher Andrew Walden. Andrew, here from Maui, we have been watching what's going on the Big Island with respect to the 30-meter telescope on Mauna Kea and the recent Supreme Court ruling here in our state. But what's the latest in terms of the Inouye telescope on Maui? And is there any impact of what's going on the TMT on the Big Island on the Inouye telescope?
The Hawaii State Supreme Court ruling does not directly impact construction on Haleakala. And so the telescope is still being built on Maui, and there's no direct impact there at all.
Are there any indirect impacts from the protesting and so forth, at least on a political level?
Well, there's always indirect impacts. This struggle really boils down to an attempt by the Office of Hawaiian Affairs to collect ground rent money on the telescope projects located throughout Hawaii. And in order to collect more rent for themselves so they can give it to their cronies, they're willing to place one of the better things that's going on in Hawaii at risk.
So this is not something for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs only on the Big Island. You said it's statewide that they've got their sights at raising their rent monies for the telescopes on their land.
Yes, their objective is to force a renegotiation of the master lease on Mauna Kea, and if they can leverage that into a way to renegotiate ground rents from Haleakala, they will do that too.
You're saying it's about land and money, but that's not what I see in the general news media. What I usually see are protesting Native Hawaiians talking about religious rights.
Yes, and that's an illusion. The talk about religious rights is really talk about rent money.
So that's really, if you would, a front for going after more money at the Office of Hawaiian Affairs.
Yes, and people need to question whether that money is serving any useful purpose. I don't think the Office of Hawaiian Affairs programs benefit Native Hawaiians very much. They tend to benefit political insiders and the trustees themselves.
Well, let's go back to what has taken place at our state Supreme Court in terms of the Big Island 30-meter telescope. Could you just give us the latest ruling that came from them and what it means?
The Supreme Court ruled basically that the permit to build the telescope on Mauna Kea is void, and the telescope will have to go through some or all of the process again. How much of the process they have to go through is a question mark. It's really a difference between 4 years of redo or 8 years of redo. And the purpose is to force a renegotiation of the master lease, which expires in 2033, I believe.
Wow.
And if they could renegotiate that now, then OHA would get a cut of the action.
Andrew, I just have to say I don't read that in our local press. I don't read that nationally. And news media as exotic as Al Jazeera are all reporting that this is merely an oppression of the Native Hawaiians who are standing up and claiming their rights. So really, it is all about land and power in the state of Hawaii.
Yes, they've even changed the name of Mauna Kea to Mauna Ava Kea without anybody noticing or calling them on it.
Well, how about that? We've been celebrating a bit of a victory here for the transition of Hawaii into the 21st century with the saving of the Maui State Hospital by reducing its labor costs, coming about because they're able to award their labor contract to a private contractor, and that's going to be good for everybody. But we also see other union activity that may not be so good for Hawaii. Teachers union, haven't they just announced that for the care of our keiki and their education, we should increase the GE tax? And they're saying that people really like this.
Well, the HSTA Teachers Union has announced that they're going to be pushing for a 25% hike in the general excise tax, which is the tax on everything that all of our listeners here buy. There will be a change from 4% to 5% on the sister islands, and a change from 4.5% to 5.5% on Oahu.
I spent some time going to public school, and so I learned that a change from 4% to 5% is 25%. But the HSTA news release likes to call it just merely a 1% increase. Isn't that interesting? It's technically accurate, but what do you think about that?
Well, it's according to the HST, it would extract $750 million from consumers' pockets every year, which comes up to $535 per person, or it would be $2,140 for a family of four every year, forever. There's no end on this tax.
Now, I can see some families in the upper middle class range not being highly impacted by that, but aren't a lot of families in the lower income range heavily affected by the GE sales tax that we have on virtually every purchase?
Yes, the cost of living in Hawaii is very high. This will make it higher, and the GE tax is particularly nefarious because it pyramids throughout the structure. So when you go to a store, you pay the GE tax on the things you buy. The store is paying the GE tax on the electricity and the fuel that it uses in its business. It may also pay the GE tax on the rent that it pays for the building or the land under the building. It may pay GE tax if it hires temporary employees. And so the GE tax multiplies again and again and again throughout the economy, and so a 5% hike or a 5% GE tax actually impacts the cost of goods much more than 5%.
That's amazing. And, you know, this is part of the sleight of hand that takes place in politics as we go to the legislature. To say something is not very harmful just a small 1% shift, but in reality it's something that impacts the economy. And a lot of those people at the lower end of the economy are the ones who struggle most in terms of their children in the schools and their needs. Andrew, thank you very much for being with us today.
Aloha.
Andrew Walden, publisher of the Hawaii Free Press, available at hawaiifreepress.com.
We're going to take a short break. We'll be back with the Grassroot Institute with Dr. Keli'i Akina. Have you ever wondered, why is milk so expensive on Maui? Why is my rent going up? Why are there so many homeless on Maui? The Grassroot Institute is here to help. Since 2001, the Grassroot Institute has been Hawaii's only independent think tank working to bring people together around solutions that work. For a free copy of our top 10 solutions to ending the problem of homelessness, visit our website at www.grassrootinstitute.org. We'll also give you our weekly report, our TV show, and a podcast just by signing up for free at www.grassrootinstitute.org. See you soon. We're back, and you're listening to the Grassroot Institute with Dr. Keli'i Akina.
Millennials are beginning to shape the future of our country, and some people question whether these young men and women really have an understanding of the values that have made this nation and these islands great. Liberty, history, economics. These may not be the common topics you think that young people talk about, but we're delighted that there is a group of these young people, Young Americans for Liberty, who are on our college campuses, and Grassroot Institute is proud to support them and work with them. Today we get to talk with Sean Mitsui, president of the chapter at the University of Hawaii, and the secretary of the chapter, Mr. Clarke Velasco, two young men who take a look at liberty here in our country and distinguish themselves by being those kinds of millennials who are shaping a future that we can be glad to see come about. Sean and Clarke, one of the things that I really admire about you and all of your fellow colleagues at the University of Hawaii is that in addition to the heavy load of studying, in addition to the part-time jobs, you are all devoting yourselves to learning ideas about free markets. You're reading books, watching videos, and you're promoting these ideas to fellow students. So what compels you, Sean? Why do you do this?
Well, I just want to advocate for the right things, and I want to be able to provide a future not just for the state, but for our country as a whole.
Clarke, it is a lot easier for most students just to be involved in getting their degree program done and their part-time jobs. What motivated you to be part of the Young Americans for Liberty?
Well, there's something to say that there's something that can be said for going beyond just the books and just the book learning beyond the classroom. And, sometimes there's a call to action for people. And for me, it's just advocating the ability for students to learn about the liberties and freedoms they should have and deserve.
Sean, as president of the chapter, what are the basic ideas for which you stand?
Here at Young Americans for Liberty, we advocate principles based on individual freedoms, small limited government, and free market economics. I think those are very foundational beliefs that are necessary for any society to progress, but at the same time keep a sense of accountability in place.
Clarke, how do you think our state government here in Hawaii is doing in terms of really providing all of the liberties and freedoms that we need?
Well, there are certain things that could be improved upon, and I think that in order for us to listen to those views, it needs to be more voices that can be heard. It shouldn't be just a one-sided argument. It should be there should be a forum for which all of us can say what we need to say and not just, the government wants it, therefore we must do it.
Yes, and some of those issues that you're concerned with, Sean?
I'm really concerned about the homelessness issue here in Hawaii. I think we tend to just brush off the issue very easily. We just say that, we tend to ignore the issue by reallocating these homeless people temporarily to someplace else where they might not get much attention, but we're basically brushing off the problem in the short term, where we're really not doing anything to address the root of the problem itself.
Well, haven't you noticed, though, in the news media coverage, for the most part, the activity concerning homelessness is largely a call for more government funding, federal funding or state funding, and more government agencies involved to move them from place to place or to provide them with welfare services. So isn't the idea of reaching out to homeless people really more of the big government approach, or do you as a libertarian have a different approach?
I come from the perspective that there can be certain programs in place that would help these homeless people a little bit, but there's also an alternative, which are, through private charity, we can help these people out. There's more of a greater sense of accountability there as to like how we use our money, and oftentimes it's used a lot more responsibility when helping out these people.
So seeking efforts from the private sector through business and through charity would be preferable than increasing the amount of government dollars that's going to this.
Certainly, for the sake of accountability.
Clarke.
Recently read an article, I think it was Washington Post, I think it was also published in The Atlantic, that it was only very recently that the federal government finally removed the term Oriental from its vernacular. So that's just like one example of the type of red tape that we'd have to cut through if we create more agency, if we make big government less accountable and more in charge of things that could be much better solved in the private sector. And there's another article that I read in the Civil Beat online publication where there was a businessman, I'm unsure of his name right now, but he is more than willing to front close to $100 or over $100 million in real estate just to help the homeless. Whereas where we see the government shuffling its foot from one foot to another, we see the private sector stepping up to the plate and willing to throw the pitch. But
Sean, yet when there are private sector initiatives or corporate responses, or even the wealthy want to serve and provide housing and land development for those who need affordable homes, we run into a lot of what you're concerned about in terms of government regulation.
Certainly, and in addition to government regulation, and I think the argument for it is that companies shouldn't be making profits, which is something that I just have to disagree with. I mean, as a business, you have to be able to make profits in order to be able to pay for employees, in order to expand your business. But whether or not you make profits or not is essentially up to your consumers, to your customers. If they buy your product, then you'll get money. If they don't, you don't.
So you're saying there's nothing really antithetical about businesses making a profit and ultimately enabling help for the poor and those who need it most. How does that work?
I think by letting businesses do what they want, provide their own services that they find will be very prospective, we as taxpayers wouldn't be able to have to pitch in every single time, at the whims of, whatever our public officials tell us. So many times government tends to waste a lot of taxpayer money. But if we can have some of these businesses be able to pitch in, like what Clarke said, then I think we'd be able to provide a better mechanism for being able to help out these people.
One of the tenets of your organization, Young Americans for Liberty, and certainly at the Grassroot Institute as well, is the making sure that we ourselves are acting with responsibility and also promoting the idea that people should act with responsibility. What do you think, Clarke, about the recent movement across the nation and at the University of Hawaii and throughout the colleges, even on the island of Maui and Kauai and the Big Island, where students protested their student loans and said basically, we do not want to pay back our student loans. College should be free. Your thoughts about that, as a student who might even have student loans?
The GED and the high school diploma used to be the greatest thing in the world back in the 50s and 60s. But now that everybody's getting them or pretty much wants to get them or already has them, now the next best thing to make yourself marketable in any sort of business field or really anything that's white collar, you're required almost to have an undergraduate degree. When we start making it so that everybody is not only able to go to college, but forced to go to college, then we kind of devalue the diploma. It's not to say that nobody should go to college. It's just that we devalue pretty much the results of everyone else's hard work who actually want to be there. We all see the kids who don't want to be in high school. We all see the kids who don't really want to be in college. We all see them make their choices, and it's kind of unfair to put that burden on the taxpayer to enable those children to make those choices because they're not even adults yet.
Sean, what are your thoughts about wiping out student loans? Is it really going to be the case then that everybody gets a free college education, or do you understand economics a little bit differently?
I think the whole movement is very well intentioned, and I do understand their frustration, but unfortunately, so many times the problem has been with government itself, government giving out these loans and basically guaranteeing payments to colleges. colleges are basically able to raise their price as much as possible now, and we have to like ask ourselves, when are we going to stop doing that? And we just have to, like, there's no such thing as a free lunch, that someone has to, pick up the slack and pay for it. And we just can't say that, we're going to wipe out student loans, which is just a temporary solution. Does that mean you're going to wipe out every other student loans after that too? There's a whole economic argument and a moral argument that I think Clarke just made just now, for people who want to who actually do want to go to college, but their degrees get undervalued.
So there ain't no such thing as a free lunch.
Yeah.
Thanks for being with us today, Sean and Clarke.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Sean Mitsui, president of the Young Americans for Liberty at the University of Hawaii, and Clarke Velasco, secretary of the organization.
You're listening to the Grassroot Institute with Dr. Keli'i Akina. I'm Joe Kent. Maui's coral reefs are some of the most majestic reefs on the planet, but recently many of our reefs have been turning white. The effect, known as bleaching, is causing concern for many Maui residents, and we're here today to talk with an expert to help us understand the problem.
We're here with Dr. Stephen Dollar, Coastal Resources Specialist at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we've been hearing a lot about bleaching on Maui's reefs. What is bleaching, and are Maui's reefs experiencing this?
To answer the second question first, yes, they indeed are experiencing it at this time. What bleaching is that corals are essentially colonies of a combination of animals and plants, and the plant part of them is these single-celled plants called zooxanthellae, and they act like any other plant in that they take in sunlight and nutrients and provide food for the corals. What happens when corals are subjected to stresses, different kinds of environmental stresses? They extrude these zooxanthellae, they kick them back out into the water. I'm not sure anybody really understands why this works, why this is a response to the stress, but what it does is these zooxanthellae give the corals their color, so when they extrude them, they appear to be white, and that's why they look bleached. The corals are still alive when they're bleached. It doesn't kill them, and in many cases they can recover when the stress is removed, and they take these, we'll pull these zooxanthellae back out of the water and incorporate them back into their skeleton, and they resume looking like they did before. In the case we're experiencing now, the stress is elevated temperature, and that this is kind of a unique situation, in that this is a global stress right now. It's happening in all the oceans in the world, probably as a result of the ongoing severe El Nino. And this has been an especially significant bleaching event here in Hawaii. Usually the bleaching in Hawaii is restricted to places where there's restricted water flow, bays and inlets, places like Kaneohe Bay on Oahu, where you don't get a lot of water circulation. This event we're experiencing now is unique in that it seems to be happening at a lot of open coastal places where you do have a lot of good water circulation.
I see. So it's happening across our islands, actually, not just on Maui.
That's correct. It's not only across our islands, it's a global event. It's happening all over the world.
Is there a way to protect against that in Hawaii?
No, not really. As I said, this is an event linked to global climate, and there's really no way to protect it, to get the water to cool off by any artificial means really isn't an option. As I said, this isn't necessarily a lethal event, and in the past, a lot of reefs in Hawaii that have suffered bleaching return to normal once the water cools off. We're in that phase right now where the water is cooling back down, and now what we need to do is go back out and look and see what the end result of the bleaching was, whether it turned out to be lethal or whether it was a temporary phenomenon that now has been rectified and the reefs have returned to normal.
Aha, so many people in Hawaii might remember all the hurricanes that came our way this past summer, and now they seem to be stopping, along with El Nino, which And the waters are starting to cool, as you're saying. So that might bring the reef back?
So we had a lot of hurricanes this hurricane season, 15, I think. None of them hit the Hawaiian Islands with the severity that we had Hurricanes Eva and Aniki back in 1982 and 92, respectively. And what people don't remember, because it's been a while now, almost 25 years, is that those two hurricanes caused massive damage to the reefs by wave stress. The south shores of both Oahu and Kauai, particularly, where there was a direct impact from those hurricanes, caused serious damage to the reef. In terms of breakage, this wasn't a bleaching event. This was the corals just got broken and turned into rubble, basically, by the big storm waves.
I see. Well, some people on Maui say that many proposed developments would cause the reefs to bleach further. Is this true from your analysis?
Well, it could be. I mean, it depends on what the impact of the development is. There's a theory, and it really hasn't been proven, that, I say that a bleaching event isn't necessarily lethal, that repeated bleaching events that don't allow the coral communities to recover between them could have a much more serious effect than any single event. So if we have other stresses on top of the temperature, say sediment stress, corals don't like to live in areas where there's a lot of mud in the water, then you could have this sort of double whammy, and then it could cause a more permanent impact to the reefs. So in places where you do have a lot of sediment going in that might be related to shoreline development, you could have an amplified effect.
Is there a chance that some proposed developments on Maui may actually save the reef?
Well, it's like yes. I mean, to answer that in one word, but any activity on land that serves to reduce the input of mud to the ocean, particularly in places where there were previous land uses, such as large-scale agriculture, that were really pretty bad in terms of runoff. Any activity on land that reduces that kind of input can be considered a positive benefit to the reef.
Well, the best way for our reefs to heal might just be to wait for the weather to get better.
Well, that's going to happen, yeah. Hopefully the El Nino that we're seeing this year, which is severe, and some people are saying is the most severe ever recorded, doesn't repeat in future years. And if that's the case, we won't see these bleaching events.
I see. Well, sounds like the water's starting to cool, so we'll see if the reef starts to come back. Thanks so much for joining us, Dr. Stephen Dollar.
Thank you.
Dr. Stephen Dollar is a coastal resources specialist at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back with the Grassroot Institute with Dr. Keli'i Akina. Have you ever wondered, why is milk so expensive on Maui? Why is my rent going up? Why are there so many homeless on Maui? The Grassroot Institute is here to help. Since 2001, the Grassroot Institute has been Hawaii's only independent think tank working to bring people together around solutions that work. For a free copy of our top 10 solutions to ending the problem of homelessness, visit our website at www.grassrootinstitute.org. We'll also give you our weekly report, our TV show, and a podcast just by signing up for free at www.grassrootinstitute.org. See you soon. We're back, and you're listening to the Grassroot Institute with Dr. Keli'i Akina.
Now keeping you informed with what's going on here in the county of Maui, the News Report with Joe Kent.
In the news on Maui, a committee to debate the county manager form of government has begun discussions. The county manager form of government could replace the current mayoral form of government on Maui. Condo sales are up, while single-family home sales dropped 5.3% compared to last year. Central Maui posted the most home sales. And a group on Maui is looking to promote hospice care. The group must go through the Certificate of Need process first.
We're here with Charlotte Igo, Managing Business Partner for Complete Hospice of Hawaii. Welcome, Charlotte.
Thank you.
So I understand you folks are trying to start a hospital on Maui. Is that right?
Well, it's actually a hospice, but yes, we are.
A hospice. What's the difference between a hospital and a hospice?
A hospice is specifically for people with a terminal diagnosis. And so a hospital, you go in for everything from a broken hip to birthing a baby to dying. And hospice and our palliative care program is specifically for people who either have a chronic life-limiting disease that can't get better, or a life-limiting disease and they really are rounding third base and headed home, so to speak. And so we specifically have the specialty of caring for people who are dying.
So it's specialty care.
Absolutely.
And on Maui, some people are hesitant when we say, let's build something, let's build a hospital. Is that what you folks are trying to do?
Well, actually, it's not. And that has been the most shocking aspect to most people that we've encountered here in Hawaii. There's no physical structure that's necessary. We'll work with the places that are already in business. We contract for what in our industry is termed as inpatient care. 99% of our services are provided in someone's home. And think about it from your perspective. When you don't feel good, do you want to be someplace else or do you want to be at home? Most people want to be at home surrounded by the people that they love, their pets, eating whatever they want to eat. We allow them the opportunity to do that. And so really what we need are good people, and I provide them the tools and the freedom to be excellent, and I stand back. And so we provide all the medications, not just those that are related to the terminal diagnosis. We provide the care they need in their home. And the best thing about it is it's paid for by insurance and Medicare. And so the people that we work for, meaning the patients and their families, don't have an out-of-pocket cost. They don't have to choose between macaroni and cheese and care. They can have both.
Right. On Maui right now, you're offering more of a service than a structure.
Yes, that's exactly it, because the structures already exist.
Right now, you're trying to get through the certificate of need process then, which I understand is sort of the last step for any medical care that wants to come to Hawaii. Is that right?
That's right. It's been a challenge, if I were to be absolutely candid. We've been in the process for about 11 months, and we're at the point of having 3 meetings, 3 public forums with different groups. And so I'll be traveling to the lovely island of Maui 3 times to sit down and talk to people about what it is and how we do it. And then it goes up for a decision. And I'm certainly hoping that we get a thumbs up.
What do you say when people tell groups like you that, well, we actually don't need new care on Maui, and they say we don't need, quote unquote, need, in terms of the certificate of need law, your service? What do you say to folks who say that?
With all due respect, Hawaii is listed as 48 in availability of care. About 30% of your 65 and older crowd have died on hospice. And so that tells me that 70% aren't getting hospice. And so while the hospices here may be providing a good service, they're not infiltrating and reaching the clientele as effectively as they could and as effectively as it's been done in other places. I can certainly understand why any of my competitors wouldn't want any more competition. And every market that I work in has competition, but it keeps the industry improving. If I hadn't had the opportunity, I wouldn't have made the palliative improvement. I was told over and over again for people that I worked for, both for-profit and not-for-profit, we weren't going to do it because it was too different. Okay, but sometimes different is better.
So certificate of need laws are typically pretty challenging for many people who want to provide health care on Maui to get through. And how are you folks going to get through the process?
Hopefully by putting our best foot forward. We really are committed to providing care anywhere we find that there's a need. And there is a need here, and as evidenced by the large percentage of people who aren't receiving hospice services. And so we'll explain what we do. I think that what we do really speaks for itself. It lowers costs. It opens access to people who are otherwise disenfranchised, the elderly, the impoverished, and people who are having a hard time getting to a physician's office for any reason. Nobody wants to be sick, and nobody wants to die in a hospital. They want to be at home. And so that's what we do.
Well, anyone who's lived on Maui knows that that healthcare is definitely needed. So good luck to you in this process.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
Okay, thanks so much. Charlotte Igo is a managing business partner for Complete Hospice of Hawaii.
You're listening to the Grassroot Institute with Dr. Keli'i Akina.
One of the most important efforts that we must stand behind is the education of our young people, and indeed all people, in free market economics. A free society needs to have an educated society, and one of the best ways to help bring about that education is to expose young people to a wonderful work by grassroots scholar Kenneth Schoolland called The Adventures of Jonathan Gullible, a free market odyssey. Each week we've been playing a portion of this, and then Ken and I talk about it. Listen now.
As you may recall, we last left Jonathan Gullible on a remote Pacific island after his boat was blown far off course by a terrific storm. Eager to learn more about the island, he wandered into a nearby town where he found 2 tall iron bar fences, one on either side of the road. Walking up to a uniformed guard on the road between the 2 fences, Jonathan asked,
"Pardon me, sir, but can you tell me what these 2 iron fences are for?"
"The iron bars on the right side of the road are for our zoo."
"What is a zoo?"
"Well, a zoo is a place to keep many animals from all over the world. These fences are used to keep them in one place so that people can study them and so that these strange animals won't go about harming society."
"It must cost you a fortune to find these animals, bring them here, and provide for them."
"Oh, I don't pay for the zoo out of my own pocket. Everyone pays a zoo tax."
"Everyone?"
"Well, there are some people who have no interest in the zoo, and there are some who feel that the animals should only be studied in their natural habitat. When these people refuse to pay their zoo taxes, they are removed from their natural habitat and placed behind those iron bars across the street. Such people can then be studied, and they are prevented from harming society."
"If you don't want to do people harm, how do you know which side of the fence is better?"
So ends another bizarre episode in the life of Jonathan Gullible. JonathanGullible.com.
Ken, that was just a delightful story, but like so many of your stories, my laughter turns to tears when I start to realize that we're talking about home.
Yes, that's right. It first came to me when all the controversy surrounded the zoo down near Honua'ula in Waikiki. And I was always puzzled. Why would people come here to the middle of the Pacific, to Waikiki, to see giraffes and elephants and so on? And when they had some of the animals dying because of bad care, I questioned the idea of paying the zoo tax. But then it occurs to me that if you don't pay the zoo tax, you can be put in the people zoo because you're not paying for what they've determined you have to.
Well, that is a poignant way of helping us to realize that we're actually being coerced. We don't think a lot about it, but the punishment of being put into a people zoo, as exaggerated as that really is, hits the nail on the head that every day we are paying for things that somebody else, somewhere else, decided should be forced upon us. And that's the nature of tax, isn't it?
Yeah, about half of the expenses, I understand, about half of the expense of the zoo is paid for by the gate fee, by the people who use it. But the other half is paid for by people all around the islands, whether they're interested in it or not, or even whether they believe in it. I mean, there's a perfectly strong argument that animals should be studied in their natural habitat. People don't need to come to Waikiki to look at elephants and giraffes. They can look at it on television. They can go travel to those places. But to compel them to pay for it, when it's really an attraction for tourists who are coming to Waikiki and to a great extent, why not let people pay for it at the gate if they really like it?
Well, Ken, let me play the devil's advocate for a moment. Somewhere down the line, people will say that the zoo exists to serve the common good, the greater good of everyone, and that we've all had a say, because this is a democracy, and we've elected our officials, and they have represented us, and they have made the decision to use resources in this way. And so it's just part of being in the society, and it's a good thing. And so although I may not personally agree with it, because we are a democracy, and most of us have supported the people who are in office and decided that our money should be used this way, we just go along with it.
Our country was established on the principle of freedom and individual rights, and that democracy was to be a limited democracy, a government that was limited to the protection of people's rights to their own life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If we were ruled by absolute majorities, what John Stuart Mill called the tyranny of the majority, then why not let them decide what we're going to eat? Why not let them decide what time we should all go to bed, what time, how many children we should be allowed to have? In other words, if decisions are not to be made by ourselves in a free society, then why not allow government by majority rule to determine everything? And of course, we don't accept that because that's that would be an absolute tyranny, whether it's by majority vote or, in fact, it's a very corrupted system. We know that majorities don't really have the influence even in democracy. It's often corrupted by campaign contributions and special interest insider cronyism and all that sort of thing. So even if it was a pure democracy, it would still be questionable to let it make all the decisions for us.
Let's consider the alternative for a moment, that government does not force us to pay for things that we don't want and instead leaves to the market whether or not we have a zoo and so forth. Some might argue that many good things that society should have, whether it be ambulance services or trash picking up and so forth, wouldn't happen because you need the force of government in order to bring these things about. What are your thoughts about that?
I think along the lines of Henry David Thoreau. Actually, this idea at the very end of the story, on which side of the fence is it better to be on if you really are in favor of freedom? He opposed the things that were supported by government in his day, the war in Mexico and slavery. And he opposed those things. He says, they have no business forcing me to pay for that sort of thing. And so by refusing to pay his tax, he spent time in jail until he got bailed out. But I think that we have to recognize that the Founding Fathers insisted that government was a limited, had a limited role in our lives, that we have rights to our own life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
In your book, The Adventures of Jonathan Gullible, A Free Market Odyssey, Jonathan has a creed, or a credo, really. It's a statement about liberty in which he announces that your body is your own, your life is your own, and from that deduces that your labor, and as a result, your money is your own. So you see taxation for all of these things that we don't want to be a form of violating our personal liberty.
Sure, because, as you mentioned, these are all extensions of the same thing. You own your life, your liberty, and the product of your life and liberty, which is your property. If the government takes away your property, they've taken essentially away that portion of your past, the life and liberty that it took to produce that kind of wealth in order for them to take it. And so, yes, it's a part of your life, and it's as important as your. I think of life as your future, your liberty as your present, and your property is the product of your past life and liberty, what you've produced in the past. And if they take it away from you, you have to do it again in the future to replace it. And you say that we seldom see the violence enacted by the government against us, but that's because we become so obedient to the threats of government. If you resist, what will they do? They'll come up to you with guns. And if you resist that, well, then the severe ultimate penalty.
Well, maybe there should be a zoo for the people who don't want to pay the zoo tax so that we can actually see what government does to us when we live under coercion and have our liberties truncated.
It would be interesting to actually look at the zoos and find out how many people are there for actually violating the rights of others, and how many people are there because their rights have been violated. And I would say that in the case of victimless crimes, such as the possession of marijuana and so on, they're the victims of society that has imposed its will on them and tried to control their life, liberty, and property in ways that belong to themselves.
Ken, thank you for this insight into what really is happening to our liberties through the taxation system.
Well, thank you, Keli'i.
Kenneth Schoolland, professor at Hawaii Pacific University and the author of The Adventures of Jonathan Gullible, A Free Market Odyssey.
Well, Dr. Akina, another great show.
It sure has been, and it's been great because our listeners are no Ka'oi here in the county of Maui. Signing off today, this is Keli'i Akina with Joe Kent for Grassroot Institute. Aloha.
The Grassroot Institute with Dr. Keli'i Akina is brought to you by the Ho'omoana Foundation, helping one person at a time. If you'd like to get a copy of our show, just visit www.grassrootinstitute.org. We'll see you next Monday at 7 a.m. right here on KAOI. Thanks for listening.